My first Little House books. My Little House, ABC. Adapted from the Little House books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Illustrated by Renee Graef. A is for apron. Laura was making a little apron for her rag doll on the banks of Plum Creek. B is for butter. C is for churn. When Ma took off the churn cover, there was the butter in a golden lump. Little House in the Big Woods. D is for deer. Twice, Laura and Mary saw deer looking at them with their large, dark eyes. Little House in the Big Woods. E is for eggs. Laura and Mary gathered the eggs. Little House in the Big Woods. F is for fiddle. Pa sat for a long time in the doorway and played his fiddle. Little House on the Prairie. G is for grass. The soft grass made a green carpet for them. Little House in the Big Woods. H is for house. I is for icicles. Icicles hung from the eaves of the house to the snowbanks. Little House in the Big Woods. J is for jumping jack. There was a jumping jack on the banks of Plum Creek. K is for kettle. Ma filled the kettle with water. Little House in the Big Woods. L is for lantern. M is for mittens. Laura put her hands into her red mittens while Ma lighted the lantern. Little House in the Big Woods. N is for nuts. Laura and Mary and Ma went to gather walnuts and hickory nuts and hazelnuts. Little House in the Big Woods. O is for onions. Onions were made into long ropes and braided together by their tops. Little House in the Big Woods. P is for pancakes. For breakfast, there were pancakes. Little House in the Big Woods. Q is for quilt. Laura and Mary had started to make patchwork quilts. Little House in the Big Woods. R is for ribbons. Laura and Mary were dressed in their best clothes, with fresh ribbons in their hair. Little House in the Big Woods. S is for sunbonnet. T is for tin pail. Laura's sunbonnet hung down her back, and she swung her tin pail on the banks of Plum Creek. U is for uniform. There were 2 armies of tin soldiers with uniforms painted bright blue and bright red on the banks of Plum Creek. V is for violets. Violets and buttercups were thick in the prairie hollows on the banks of Plum Creek. W is for wagon. X is for ox. The big ox and the little ox leaned into their yoke, and the wagon started on the banks of Plum Creek. Y is for yarn. Her hair was black yarn. Little House in the Big Woods. Z is for zebra. The Noah's Ark was the most beautiful thing that Laura had ever seen. There were zebras and elephants and tigers and horses on the banks of Plum Creek.